The magical beings of mythic Orbis live for a long time and have complex narrative lives, creating the patterns of myth. Finally, the magical beings of mythic Orbis told the ultimate story, that of their own death. For some, this was an artistic transfiguration into the concrete, non-magical substance of the world. For others, this was a war in which all were slain, their bodies becoming the substance of the world. For yet others, this was a romantic marriage and parenthood, with the parent spirits naturally having to die and give way to the succeeding mortal races. The agent of this communal decision was Lorkhan, whom most early myths vilify as a trickster or deceiver. More sympathetic versions of this story point out Lorkhan as being the reason the mortal plane exists at all. The magical beings created the races of the mortal Orbis in their own image, either consciously as artists and craftsmen, or as the fecund rotting matter out of which the mortals sprung forth. The magical beings then, having died, became the Atada. The Atada are the things perceived and revered by the mortals as gods, spirits, or geniuses of Orbis. The Daedra were created at this time also, being spirits and gods more attuned to Oblivion. It is here in the tangled, overgrown jungles of the Elder Scrolls creation story that the distinction between the Daedra and the Aedra is made. The metaphysics and mythos of this universe are full of contradictions, and the passing of the centuries has obscured our understanding of the past. And in light of this, I think it's worth exploring the question, what constitutes a Daedric prince? And subsequently, are all of the Daedric princes you know truly Daedric princes? Hey guys, it's Drew the Daedrologist here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. When studying these fascinating lords, Malikov being the most recent example, I noticed some of my fellow Daedrologists were pointing out that Malikov is not technically a Daedric prince. But how could that be true? It's well known that there are 16 princes, or 17 if you choose to include Jigalag. So why is there still discourse over what classifies a Daedric prince? Well, before we answer this question, let's start by clearing up the definitions of Aedra and Daedra. Unlike much of the Elder Scrolls' abstract lore, these terms are not subjective and have precise meanings in Elvish. Aedra translates to ancestor, while Daedra translates to, you guessed it, not ancestor, or not our ancestors. And in order to get an idea of what makes a Daedric prince, we must turn our attention back to the monomyth creation story, specifically the Cyrodiilic interpretation of the events. To preface this, remember that the Imperials call Lorkhan Shazar, and they believe he is the lost sibling of the sacred divines. Now, some of the Aedra felt deceived by Shazar, claiming they were tricked into their demise. Others, led by Akatosh, felt that, while they suffered and were diminished by the process of creation, the mortal world they had made was glorious, filling their hearts and spirits with hope. But what about those deities who were skeptical of Shazar's proposal? What happened to them? Well, when the Daedra lords heard Shazar, they mocked him, and the other Aedra. Cut parts of ourselves off and lose them forever? That's stupid. You'll be sorry. We are far smarter than you, for we will create a new world out of ourselves. But we will not cut it off, or let it mock us. But we will make this world within ourselves, forever ours, and under our complete control. So the Daedra lords created the Daedric Realms, and all the ranks of lesser Daedra, great and small. We see through this creation myth that the Daedric princes did not want to invest their power into something greater than themselves. Instead, they chose to limit themselves to creating realms which would not cripple or debilitate them. So does that mean a Daedric prince is a Daedra capable of creating a realm? That would make sense considering they're called Daedra lords, and by traditional definitions, lords were landowners. But that cannot be what makes a Daedra a Daedric prince, for there are plenty of examples of Dremora, Winged Twilight, and other lesser Daedra owning their own planes. And there are at the very least 37,000 known Daedric realms and pockets of Oblivion. Unless he is exaggerating to make himself seem more influential than he truly is, Lord Farn Wee Hen, a prominent warrior demi-prince in service to Boethia, claims the following. Over 37,000, there are more than that in the Mora Clarion region alone, but most are too strange for mortal comprehension. You're better off just thinking about those planes associated with the princes, demi-princes and Daedra lords, as those all partake of concepts that are at least somewhat familiar to you. Of them all, if you are as warlike as most Tamrielics, you're sure to find the Maelstrom Arena the most welcoming. If you're up for the challenge, you'll find the portal to my handsome little realm currently anchored in the foothills of the Hrothgarian Mountains. In common with the greater Daedric princes, my realm of Maelstrom and myself are indistinguishable. My pocket reality is a projection of my mind, nature and will. And then there are of course the collective realms, created with no ruler at all. There are physical realms such as Infernus, home of the Flame Atronachs, that exist as collective extensions of their numerous less powerful inhabitants. The Daedric Demi-Prince continues his verbose rant for quite some time, even referring to half-finished demi-planes. Long story short though, the lore of ESO seems to suggest that Oblivion and its realms of existence are practically infinite, so it's safe to say that not every landowner in Oblivion qualifies as a Daedric Prince. So what does distinguish the Daedric Princes from all the other Daedra great and small? Well, that would be their vital decision not to fall for Lorkhan's coaxing, and his alleged trickery. Every Daedric Prince existed in some form or another as a god during the creation of Mundus, but if we look into the origins of each of the Daedric Princes, we'll soon see that several of them did not refuse Lorkhan's proposal. Some of them actually did aid in the creation of the mortal realm. But which ones? Well, these are the Daedric Princes who we know refused Lorkhan and chose to create their own realms of Oblivion instead. There's Azura, Boethia, Clavicus Vile, Hermaeus Mora, Hircine, Jiggalag, Mephala, Molag Bal, Namira, Nocturnal, Periite, Sanguine, and Vermina. I count 13 princes, not the commonly accepted 16 or 17, so there are at least 3 princes who do not fit the definition. The first lord I neglected to mention is Malikov. I covered the origins of this paternal prince in a recent video, but in case you missed it, Malikov was formerly the elven ancestor spirit named Trinomac. Trinomac, and therefore Malikov, was actually an Aedra, an original spirit committed to the creation of Mundus. It was only after being deceived by Mephala and devoured by Boethia that Trinomac was reborn in the Oblivion realm of Ashpit. Malikov therefore did not choose to be a Daedra, and considering the barren wasteland he calls home, he likely did not create the Ashpit. He hardly fits the bill for a Daedric prince, yet no one on Mundus would argue that he isn't one. How about Meridia? Well, not only did Meridia help Lorkhan to create Mundus, she was actually a member of the Magna Gi, the children of Magnus, the god of magic. However, when Magnus and his children saw the truth of Lorkhan's grand scheme, they fled back to the Daedric realm of Aetherius, tearing great rifts in the sky, creating the sun and stars. But during their ascension, Meridia was cast down, condemned for allegedly convening with the illicit spectra, aka the Daedra. Not only did she aid Lorkhan, but when she created her realm in Oblivion, she used the divine Daedric light of Magnus as her material. This seems entirely opposed to what we would consider Daedric. The only thing about Meridia that relates to the other Daedra is proximity. Not only did Meridia barge her way into the ranks of the Daedra Lords, but during the time of creation, she and her siblings were responsible for forging another of the princes, in the blazing inferno deep within the bowels of Lig. This prince is Mehrunes Dagon. During the turbulent times of the Dawn Era, where the closest thing to documented history was rumour and folklore, there was a continent named Lig, ruled over by the Dread Kings. These aquatic kingdoms constantly warred over territory. As a result, the Magna Gi took it upon themselves to create a god of their own, intended for good, imbued with the very essence of hope. Only this backfired, and the great potential for destruction intrinsic within hope was unleashed. Dagon then led his Red Legion in a rebellion, which saw towers toppled, great cities destroyed, Templars of the upstart slaughtered, and slaves violently revolting against their keepers as hope spread like a brush fire. The mythos of Lig and the Dawn Times is a topic we could get lost in, and we will in an upcoming video, but for now we simply need to know that Dagon was created by the Magna Gi, and was not an original deity present when Lorkhan's plan was unveiled. Finally, we have the duality of order and chaos, the lords Jiggalag and Sheogorath. The Prince of Order and Determinism, Jyggalag, denied Lorkhan just as the other Daedra did, but Sheogorath may not have existed at this time. It's all rather nebulous. Some say he's the Siphish-shaped hole brought into being when Lorkhan's heart was ripped from his chest. If this is true, then Sheogorath did not exist during creation. Others claim that Jyggalag and Sheogorath are one and the same. The story goes that Jyggalag had, in times beyond memory, grown in power so much that the other Daedric princes grew jealous and fearful. They cursed Jyggalag to live as Sheogorath, the incarnation of the thing he hated most. At the end of every era, Jyggalag was allowed to take on his true form once again, and reconquer his lands, an event known as the Grey March. After that, however, he would be transformed back into Sheogorath, and Sheogorath would spread madness upon his lands once more. In this poetic parable, the Prince of Perfect Order was condemned to insanity, the antithesis of his sphere. This theory is likely true, as we see through the eyes of Cyrodiil's champion, the Grey March, in action. Regardless of the origin story, Sheogorath is not present for the birth of the mortal realm. In one instance, Sheogorath was born when Lorkhan lost his divine spark. In the other, he was born from the jealousy of the other Daedric princes, and we've already established that the Daedric princes came about as a result of refusing Lorkhan. And lastly, to take that one step further, Jyggalag, after being freed from the Grey March curse, restored his individuality, but now he does not rule over a realm, and instead roams the voids of Oblivion. At the end of the day, finding a coherent answer to what defines a Daedric prince is frivolous, for there are always exceptions to the rule. With all these contradictions abound, the only consistency I can find is that all of the Daedric princes we acknowledge are recognised and worshipped by mortals. This is what gives them their rank. It is a distinction we mortals make, and I doubt the princes themselves could care any less what we choose to call them. So long as there are mortals to tease and torment, so long as there are splendid shrines and statues dotting the landscape, so long as there are reverent worshippers lighting candles and preaching the glories of the Daedra lords. And there you have it, guys, my take on what makes a Daedric prince a Daedric prince. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.